You're listening to episode 3 on Tales of the Ultimate Sportsman. Today's stories start out with a sheep hunt that went bad in the mountains of British Columbia, then another duck hunt that went bad in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and finally a story of a bear attack from Soldotna, Alaska. Just another reminder to always be careful out there.
Perils of a Sheep Hunter. Written by Victor Plotnikow, British Columbia. When my feet slipped out from under me and I fell that day, I thought it would be just another minor mishap, one of many that I have had during my career as a sheep hunter. Turned out to be, however, a terrifying experience that came very close to ending my life. I have had a lifelong obsession with hunting alone in some of the wildest places left in North America. However, I no longer hunt solo. One of the reasons just might lie in the story I am about to tell. I was hunting California bighorn sheep in the south-central part of British Columbia, along the mighty Fraser River. This is very rugged, desert-like country, very different from the Peace River country where I live in the northeastern part of the province. My wife and I had driven down from Fort St. John to Clinton and then made our way down some unbelievably steep back roads to the Fraser River Valley where we set up our camp and prepared for the upcoming hunt, our second one in that area. British Columbia has 4 varieties of mountain sheep: Stones sheep, Dall sheep, Rocky Mountain bighorns, and California bighorns. I had previously harvested the first 3, but the California bighorns had always eluded me, so here I was, pushing 60, still trying to get one to complete my collection. This was not a truly solo hunt as my wife was going to be relatively close at hand, enjoying the comforts of staying in our camper and venturing out once in a while for some chikar shooting. As is common in sheep hunting, I spent the first few days doing a lot of glassing, but eventually concluded that it was time to put on my Meandle hunting boots and venture down into the steep and rocky hillsides, ravines, and cliffs where I hoped the sheep might be hiding out. The day started off pleasantly enough. My wife dropped me off and I made my way down some pretty green hillsides until I hit the rim of the canyon. The idea was to slowly make my way along the tops of the river breaks with their near vertical cliffs, glassing into the ravines and between the rock formations called hoodoos that lined the bottom of the Fraser River Canyon. Because of the rocky, uneven terrain, I often couldn't see all the way down to the river, so decided I needed to go down a ways to get a better look. That was my first mistake. What had looked like pretty easy going soon turned out to be much more rugged than I had thought, and soon I began to regret coming down lower. The steep hillsides here were covered with loose rocks, stones, and pebbles. A fall could easily result in a long slide followed by a vertical drop of 50 or more feet onto the jagged, spear-like boulders and hoodoos at the bottom, and almost certain death. I got to a point on the hillside where I could not go any further unless I made a jump. It wasn't much of a jump, nothing that I hadn't ever done before, and I decided to go for it. Mistake number 2. As I landed, my boots hit an area of small stones that acted as ball bearings. My feet immediately slipped out from under me and I fell, twisting so that I was face down. As soon as I hit the ground, I started to slide but dug the toes of my boots into the surface, confident that I would stop my descent. It was not to be. I began accelerating at a great rate of speed, frantically trying to stop. The binoculars that were around my neck were painfully digging into my t-shirt-covered chest, and I clung to my rifle with my left hand. The fingers of my right hand, meanwhile, were trying to dig into the rock as I continued to slide, and then to slide even faster. And then all of a sudden, I slowed down and came to a stop. I was going to make it, I thought. At that very instant, I began to slide again. Desperation began to set in. I tried to slow my descent by digging my rifle scope into the ground. Looking back over my shoulder, I saw that I was only 30 or so feet away from the drop-off that I knew would kill me. At the same time, I noticed a somewhat bigger rock sticking out of the ground and coming up fast on my left. I still don't know how I accomplished this, but as I came by that rock, I tossed my rifle up and caught it with my right hand, simultaneously grabbing at the embedded rock with my left. The rock held. My arm had almost been pulled out of its shoulder socket, but I had miraculously stopped. Carefully, ever so carefully, I started pulling myself sideways over the rock that had saved my life and to safer, more stable ground. Eventually I managed to get to my feet, and still shaking, evaluated my injuries. I was scratched up, bloodied, and covered in dust, but I was going to live. As I stood there, I looked over the edge of the cliff and saw that there was no way I could have survived the fall. I eventually made it back up the steep slopes by following a narrow ridge that led to those grassy hillsides above. Once there, I managed to reach my wife by two-way radio, and she picked me up on the road and drove me to camp. I sat down on a lawn chair and almost immediately fell into a deep sleep for 2 hours. The next morning, we headed for home. I have not been on a sheep hunt since.
An Icy Rescue by Tim Mohler. Albuquerque, New Mexico. It was still dark as we went about the task of putting our duck boat in the water and loading our hunting gear. It had gotten below freezing last night, but that just added to the anticipation. We knew the big mallards would be coming down from Canada with this latest cold front. I was hunting on a lake in northern Minnesota with my friend and hunting partner, Kirby Schaffner. The lake had formed a thin layer of ice overnight, and we figured it would melt off soon after sunup. Another boat had gone out before us, leaving a small channel through the frozen lake. We followed the trail for about a mile until the other boat veered off to our left. We continued on through the darkness toward our hunting blind. Suddenly, we saw a light waving frantically and heard shouting. We couldn't hear over the noise of the motor and crunching ice, so Kirby shut down the outboard and we coasted to a stop. Our hearts stopped when we finally understood that the men in the incoming boat were yelling, "Help! We're sinking!" The boat was coming at us full speed. The panicked men rammed their boat into the side of our little 10-foot craft and leapt onto the side of our boat. As they grabbed the side of our boat, their boat sank beneath the black waters. Kirby and I knelt on the bottom of the boat and struggled to pull the two men to safety. We were afraid they would capsize us and send us all into the water from which there would be no escape. The additional weight of the men made the boat very unstable and the gunwale was just inches from the waterline. We lay on the floor as Kirby started the motor and slowly and carefully turned the boat around and headed toward shore. When the terrified hunters finally caught their breath, they explained how they had gotten into such a harrowing predicament. Their boat was made of wood. As they traveled across the frozen lake, the broken ice acted like saw blades against the wooden hull. By the time they noticed water coming in, they were over a mile from shore and in 40 foot of ice-cold water. If we hadn't happened to be there, they would have had no hope of reaching safety. We left the survivors at their truck and returned to the lake. Divers were hired to recover their motor, guns and gear from the bottom of the lake. As we passed the spot where the boat went down, the only marker was a few decoys floating on the surface. Silent reminders of a hunting trip gone terribly wrong.
Bear Attack by Jim Oltersdorf, writer, photographer, Soldotna, Alaska. There could be no death any more horrifying than one of a bear attack. Even the mere thought of a bear mauling a person sends shivers to the most seasoned and experienced outdoorsman. It addresses a pronounced deep and primal fear within all humans, the fear of being killed by a wild animal. Yet, as terrifying as that thought is, that is exactly what happened to Ken Cates in Soldotna, Alaska, on a seemingly innocent spring afternoon on Tuesday, May 25, 1999. At exactly 12 o'clock noon, he told his wife of 35 years that he was going to go for a hike and would be back around 4 o'clock. He would never return. Ken Cates was as Alaskan as anyone could be. He worshipped the time he went hunting, hiking, fishing, and simply enjoying the out-of-doors. A carpenter by trade, this slender, 5 feet 10 inches tall rugged man was just 53 years old and in excellent physical shape. He spent much of his youth and adulthood in many remote areas of the bush. It was a place where he could think without being disturbed. Experienced in the ways and wisdoms of the wilds, Cates became an expert marksman and reloaded his ammunition at his home in his basement when he was unable to go to the bush. In over 45 years of trekking in Alaska, Cates never had a bad encounter with a bear. He hunted moose, and caribou with a great deal of success, and was known to pass up a shot if he couldn't kill the animal humanely. He had a select group of friends that he would hunt with, and if that wasn't possible or he decided to hunt alone, off he would go. On one of those hunts, he told his wife, Sharon, that he was after moose and would be back later. That night, when she was sound asleep, she was suddenly awakened by Ken standing next to their bed, soaked with blood. He had shot a moose and was very happy about it. She thought he had been seriously hurt with all of the blood on him, scaring her half to death. Cates was a religious man and loved to attend church on Sundays. His desire to help the folks around the small Soldotna community was well known. On one Christmas, the Cates family had a get-together with friends at their home. A number of people noticed that he would disappear out of the house for a while and then come back. Later, Sharon discovered that an elderly couple who lived by them required assistance to use the restroom. Kim was sneaking out to go over to their house to help carry them into the bathroom. That's just the kind of man he was, always helping somebody. On the other side of Ken's personality was an entirely different man. He was a loner, a very quiet man who said few words but excelled at most everything he worked at. His name was well known in the inner circles of the construction trade. He had worked jobs as a foreman as far away as Anchorage on projects that required many skills. Kim was going to retire from his work that week. He and Sharon had talked about building their dream home in Soldotna and looked forward to living out their retirement days in Alaska. But that all changed that fateful day last spring when he decided to take a quick hike up the Funny River Trail that is 6 miles east of town. Sharon Cates knew that if he said he would be gone a short while that he was headed down to the Funny River area, a part of the Kenai Wildlife Refuge. This vast wilderness area is wild, roadless, and lies south of Anchorage in the Kenai Peninsula. Although the huge Alaska brown bears are known to inhabit the area, few problems have occurred because of their presence. One of the reasons for this is that immense numbers of salmon spawn in the world-famous Kenai River and are eaten by the bears. With their bellies full, the bears usually pay no attention to the humans and are interested in only the fish. On the day of the killing, the weather was a typical Alaskan spring day on the peninsula. Although cloudy, the mid-50-degree temperature sounded good to Cates after the long, dark winter that had been endured. Leaving the house right at noon, he told her to go with her girlfriend to the store and see about buying some flowers that she had said she wanted. Shouldering his camouflaged backpack, MSR cook stove, an igniter that Sharon had bought him to light the stove, a package of ramen noodle soup, and his ever-present Winchester .280 bolt action rifle, Cates set off to the Funny River Trail. Later in the day, Sharon somehow sensed that something was amiss. When Ken didn't arrive home at 4 p.m., she became concerned. 2 hours later, she became even more worried and decided to go look for him. She and a friend went to the Funny River area and found his truck parked off the road at the trailhead. He wasn't there. A neighbor gave Sharon a cell phone to use just in case she needed it. She called the Alaskan State Troopers at 10 p.m., and their initial response was in many cases a hiker becomes lost on the maze of trails and usually arrives back late, but no worse for wear. This was not to be the case in this instance. Sharon placed numerous phone calls to all of Ken's hunting buddies and friends to aid in the search. Commencing early the following morning, approximately 40 different people and various official agencies assembled to begin their search for Ken Cates in earnest. Those that knew him were painfully aware that Ken was in trouble. He was too experienced to become simply lost on a trail that he had been on countless times over the years. He was not the type of man that would find himself in trouble out in the Alaskan bush. At daybreak, several of his hunting buddies started up the 18-inch wide muddy trail and discovered his size 10.5 boot prints. They also discovered something else that horrified them. A huge set of bear prints were on the same trail, overlapping his boot prints, headed in the same direction as he was walking. The weather had turned foul, and a drizzle had started in the yet-to-foliage-out trees. The authorities had notified the Civil Air Patrol, and with an airplane, they were airborne in the search as well. Approximately 2 miles up the Funny River area trail, there is a sharp bend 90 degrees to the right, and that's where they found Ken Cates' body. He was laying on his back with the Winchester several yards away. It had been fired twice, a spent shell on the ground, and the last fired shot still in the chamber. The third and last shell was still in the magazine, unfired. He was bitten on his head, a single bite through his skull plate, from directly behind, as forensics testing would prove later, crushing his skull and killing him instantly. He never had another second to fire the third round. It happened that quickly. Kate's MSR stove was sitting on the ground, a pan of water on it, as if he was preparing a cup of ramen soup to eat for his lunch when the attack happened. He had already stopped, which indicates that he didn't run into the bear. The bear ran into him. However, discrepancies still haunt the attack, and there's only one thing for sure about really what happened. Only Ken Cates and the bear know for sure what occurred that day on the Funny River Trail in Soldotna, Alaska. What the authorities do know, however, is that although the killing scene was relatively undisturbed, forensic evidence proved that it was indeed a bear that had attacked and killed him. Hair found on a nearby tree has proven it to be from a bear. There is one other chilling piece of evidence as well. Close inspection of that same tree revealed bear blood. Reconstruction of the attack in his final moments showed Cates had indeed shot the bear. No one knows where the Bruin was hit, but the blood validates it was hit by at least one of his .280 bullets, perhaps both. After Cates' final shot, the bear killed him. To this day, the bear has never been found. One thing that is known for sure is that the murderous bear is out in the woods somewhere, dead or very much alive. An active ground and aerial search by citizens and officials alike for the bear had produced no results. Because of the ever-present rain, any credible evidence or links to the bear vanished. When the bear's tracks were first discovered in the mud over the tracks of Cates' boot prints, many people speculated that the bear had actually stalked its prey until it was at its most vulnerable position. In this case, it would have been exactly what Cates was doing, sitting down and intent upon making his lunch, gun resting nearby, or perhaps even out of immediate reach. An Alaskan brown, as with most other predators, kills by the method of least resistance. By killing this way, there is less chance of injury to the predator when the attack takes place, most of the time. In some cases, the predator makes a mistake in judgment of distance to be covered, slips, and 1 or more seconds are gained by the prey to act. Perhaps this was the case when Cates first saw the attacking bear, giving him enough time to snatch his Winchester from where he had leaned it and shoot at the charging beast in those possible life-saving last few seconds. Maybe he was standing and holding his rifle when he first saw the bear and fired a warning shot just to scare it off, and subsequently it charged and gave him no other choice but to fire at point-blank range. As most people are aware, a sow with cubs is one of the most dangerous animals on Earth if you get between them. In a blink of an eye, the bear will charge and leave no time to climb a tree, blast a nose full of pepper spray, or take a gun and aim to shoot it. As with elk, deer, moose, and other large game species, mother and offspring are in the general area of each other, but not always side by side. Because of their playful nature, bear cubs are very susceptible to being a distance from a sow. Every tree, limb, grass, root, insect, and scurrying rodent captures the cub's attention and causes distances to increase. Maybe Cates had sat down for his meal and inadvertently sat or stood between them. When the brown sow realized there was an interloper, she immediately charged and took a round or two before she knocked him down, causing him to lose his rifle and therefore preventing him to shoot the one last cartridge. Perhaps as he was crawling to get his gun, the bear crashed over the top of him and delivered the bite that killed him. Wounded, the bear crawled off to die in an impenetrable area of brush and forest, never to be found. An Alaskan brown bear can run faster than the fastest Olympian sprinter. Covering ground at over 35 miles per hour, the brown can shorten a safe distance to a death sentence in seconds. Perhaps that's what happened in the Cates killing. What dumbfounds many residents about the bear killing this man is the known abilities that he had. For years, Ken Cates had spent countless hours in the Alaskan bush, hunting, trekking, and enjoying the entirety of it. Could a Bruin have accidentally blundered into Cates while lumbering down the muddy Funny River Trail and had no intent of killing him until it perceived him as a threat? An Alaskan Department of Fish and Game spokesman indicated there are many theories about what happened out there that day, and because of the lack of evidence, we may never know what exactly happened. Yet, despite exhaustive searches involving many people for the bear, not a single person has been mauled or killed in the area, leading speculation to believe the bear is dead from Kate's bullet. Maybe the last courageous act of Ken Kate's life was to serve him later, that indeed the last trigger squeeze he made on his Winchester did eventually kill his killer. Maybe not. One last scenario of the killing may include a chilling, premeditated conclusion to Ken Kate's life. One of the facts of this story is the bear tracks that were found in the mud atop Kate's boot prints on the trail were that of a very large bear, according to eyewitnesses. The large size indicated it would have to have been made by a boar. In the event that the food chain had reversed itself by a single thought on behalf of the bear, it could have scented Kate's, saw him as an easy meal, and stalked him quietly and as efficiently as a Bengal tiger would. An interesting fact that was found back on the trail was the bear had made a dig next to the trail, uncovering the moss, dirt, and twigs. It strikes a note of oddness that the bear would do something like that unless motivated by something. What was that something? A known behavior in bear country is that a brown will make a dig when a human urinates on the earth. Perhaps Kate's relieved himself off the trail and continued walking toward the spot he would later pick to sit on the log and fix lunch. When the bear came out of the woods and started down the same trail, it came across the place where Kate's went, smelled the human odor, and made the dig. Perhaps the bear's interpretation of that single innocent act of Kate's set into motion the horrifying attack and terrible death. If that belief held, then the bear would have had to know that Kate's was nearby. If it was the type of bear that had a great fear of humans, it would have fled the area, not followed the scent of man closer. Which opens the subject of critical exchange of thought. If the bear knew Kate's was nearby on the trail and deliberately continued walking toward him, then it had bad things on its mind for Kate's. If the bear was intent upon murdering Kate's and had decided to do so, then this monster did its job well. The end.